생각을 계속 하는 사람이어서 그런 것 같아요. 의식적으로 뭔가를 한다라기보다는. 저는 극장에 가는 걸 좋아하는 것 같아요. 영화를 좋아하기도 하는데 집에서 보기보다 극장에 가는 걸 좋아하는 것 같고, 그래서 사실 영화를 좋아하지만 딱 영화라기보다는 뭐 그림일 수도 있고 사진일 수도 있고 음악일 수도 있고 그냥 뭔가 다른 세계를 보여주는 것들이 되게 좋다고 생각을 해요. 그래서 그런 것들을 보면 나도 이런 거를 하고 싶다, 되게 좋은 거를 하고 싶다라는 생각이 드는 것 같아요. 그냥 이것저것 보는 것 같아요. 이것저것 보는 것 같고 뭘 공부를 하는 것 같지는 않은데 길을 가다가 이제 걷다 보면 궁금해질 때가 있는 것 같아요. 여기는 그래도 느낌이 뭔가 다른 것 같은데? 이런 생각이 들면 산책을 계속 반복적으로 하다가 나중에 이런 데였구나 라고 생각하고, 그리고 또 거기를 또 가보고 같은 데를 여러 번 가보면서 반복적으로 가보는 거를 좀 좋아하는 것 같아요. 그냥 그 장소에 대해서 오해하게 되는 것들? 그런 게 쌓이면 좀 쓰고 싶다고 생각하게 되는 것 같아요. 물론 이제 어디서든 책이라는 걸 냈을 때 반응이라는 거는 쓴 사람이 직접적으로 느끼기는 상대적으로 힘든 것 같기는 해요. 그리고 일단 읽는데 시간이 걸리니까 그런 것 같기도 하고, 그리고 또 코로나 때문이어서 그냥 뭐 외부로 찾아보고 이런 반응이 있구나 정도를 아는 건데, 그렇지만 되게 재밌었던 것 같아요. 신기했고, 일단 책이 나오기 전에 그 출판사분들이나 아니면 역자분들이랑 계속 이야기를 주고받는 것도 되게 재밌었고, 내가 한국어로 쓴 소설을 일본어로 번역하실 때 이런 점들을 생각을 하시는구나, 이런 것들이 되게 그리고 모르겠네요. 이게 단편이 영어로 번역되면 얼마나 많은 분들이 보실지는 모르겠지만 영미권 독자분들 만나는 기분이라기보다는 겨울이 힘든 분들이 읽고 약간의 좀 편한 시간을 가지면 좋겠다, 이런 마음인 것 같아요. 아무래도 추우면은 몸의 밸런스 같은 것도 많이 깨지고 이러니까 그런 걸 좀 예민하게 느끼는 분들이 읽으면 좋겠다 라는 생각이 좀 있어요. 질문이 되게 어려웠어요. 사실 계속 생각을 했는데 대답을 할 수는 있을 것 같은데, 그런 것 같아요. 독자로서 내가 좋아하는 책들이 있고 재밌다고 생각하는 소설들이 있고, 쓰는 사람으로서의 나는 계속 그걸 의식하면서 이런 걸 쓰고 싶어, 이런 걸 써야겠다, 되게 좋은 걸 하고 싶다, 이런 생각을 많이 하는데, 이런 것과 실제 요즘 한국 소설들, 한국 문학들이 이전과 비교해서 더 많이 번역되는 거를 뭐 어떤 식으로 연결해서 말을 해야 될지는 잘 모르겠어요. 각자 뭔가를 열심히 해서 그런 걸 수도 있고, 또 번역원이나 뭐 기타 어떤 에이전시들이나 어떤 이런 거를 연결해 줄 수 있는 것들의 역할도 있을 수 있고, 혹은 모든 것이 이전과 똑같은데 어떻게 하다 보니 잘 된 걸 수도 있고, 그냥 여러 가지가 있을 수 있을 것 같은데, 제가 가까이 느낄 수 있는, 제가 좀 몰두할 수 있는 지점에 대해서 말하자면 그냥 그런 것 같아요. 잘하고 싶다라기보단 좋은 걸 하고 싶다고 생각하는 거?
In our headlines on this Friday, July 4th, here in South Korea, the National Assembly is addressing the fate of the government-proposed supplementary budget as ruling and opposition lawmakers seek to narrow the gap over the differences. Trade negotiator Young Han-gu is heading back to the US for tariff talks this weekend ahead of next week's deadline on the pause in country-specific tariffs set by the Trump administration. Daegu City is hosting its International Musical Festival, and this year, the event takes place amid fresh enthusiasm as it follows news of a South Korean original musical winning 6 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. We start at the National Assembly today, where lawmakers across the aisle continue to lock horns over the government-proposed extra budget. For more on the fate of this bill, I have our correspondent Moon Hae-ryung standing by live. Hae-ryung, it's good to have you on. So what is the latest there?
Good afternoon, Sunny. The National Assembly's plenary session to vote on the new administration's first supplementary budget bill has been delayed, with disagreements between the ruling and opposition parties clouding the process. Lawmakers were scheduled to vote on the bill on Friday afternoon at 2 p.m., but the session was pushed back amid last-minute talks to finalize the bill at the Special Committee on Budget and Accounts meeting just prior to the plenary session. The budget was initially proposed at 30.5 trillion Korean won, or around $22 billion, and saw an expansion to just over $23 billion after committee-level reviews and adjustments. The session is expected to begin after the Special Budget Committee meeting concludes, which could be any minute now. The Democratic Party holds a majority in the National Assembly and can push the bill through on its own without the opposition People Power Party's backing, which is what is expected to happen after the PPP declared earlier today that it would be abstaining from voting.
Right. Hae-ryung, what have been the main points of contention between the two parties with regard to this bill then?
Right, so leading up to the vote, the two parties have been clashing over the bill's key provisions, particularly around how and where the additional spending should be directed. At the heart of this new budget are consumption vouchers that the ruling Democratic Party said were a point of contention with the main opposition People Power Party in the lead-up to the vote. Depending on income, Korean citizens in the capital region will receive between 150,000 and 500,000 won in spending vouchers that can be used like a gift certificate at small local businesses. The DP emphasized the urgency of passing and executing this in order to boost domestic consumption and help people's livelihoods, and said that the PPP took issue with the scope of recipients eligible for the program. Another major point of contention was the reallocation of special activity funds for the presidential office. The DP proposed restoring the funds, which are typically used for confidential or discretionary purposes, a move that drew sharp criticism from the PPP. Opposition lawmakers call this move hypocritical, given that the DP had previously slashed the same budget when in opposition. That's all for now. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Hae-ryung, thank you for now, and do keep us posted throughout the session, the day then. Moving forward, President Lee Jae-myung held his second town hall meeting on this Friday in the central city of Daejeon. There he took heed of potential ways to ease the debt burden as proposed by small business owners and the self-employed. Talks also touched upon ways to enhance science and technology policies as the new administration seeks active investment in related advancements to sharpen the country's competitive edge. The meeting ended with the president calling for policies that focus on the needs of those on the ground. The first town hall gathering took place in the southern city of Gwangju last week. And back at the Parliament earlier on Thursday, lawmakers passed a revision to the Commercial Act in a move that broadly seeks to bolster Korea's corporate market valuations. Our correspondent Park Jun-han explains.
Listed companies in South Korea will now have to be more cautious when making important decisions. This comes after the revision of the Commercial Act was passed in the National Assembly on Thursday. The amendment was one of President Lee Jae-myung's core economic pledges that he had consistently made. One of the key changes in the bill is the expansion of the duty of loyalty from serving the company to also serving its shareholders. This means corporate directors must now consider the interests of minority shareholders when making decisions. An economic expert projected that the asset market will regain momentum as the policy changes will boost individual investor sentiment.
This is seen as a positive move for market development, as it encourages minority shareholders who were previously deterred by weak protections. The revision also introduces civil and criminal liability for directors in cases of conflict between controlling and minority shareholders.
Also, the 3% rule limits the combined voting rights of a listed company's largest shareholder and related parties to 3% when electing audit committee members in a bid to strengthen corporate independence and better protect minority shareholders. For example, if their owner and their son and daughter were to exercise their voting rights, they could collectively exert up to 9% of voting rights when electing audit committee members. However, the amendment caps the combined voting rights of the largest shareholder and all those directly or indirectly related to them at 3% when electing directors to serve on the committee, including outside directors. This enhances the autonomy of individual shareholders and activist funds by reducing the controlling influence of the owner and related parties. Regarding the 3% rule, a corporate governance expert called it one of the most significant and tangible changes in corporate governance law.
By capping the voting power of the largest shareholders and parties related to them to a combined 3%, it is now possible for a coalition of minority shareholders or an activist fund to place an independent director. As minority investors become increasingly assertive, this marks one of the most significant shifts toward improving corporate governance in South Korea.
The business community, meanwhile, has voiced concerns that the revision of the law could restrict important decisions such as future investments. Among them, some are calling it an anti-corporate law and argue that it might encourage shareholders to sue management whenever they lose money. Park Junan, Arirang News.
South Korea's current account remained in positive territory in May, extending its unbroken surplus streak that began 25 months ago. But this trend is forecast to change once U.S. tariffs take root. Our correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
South Korea's current account remained in the black in May for the 25th consecutive month, logging a current account surplus of $10.1 billion. According to the Bank of Korea on Friday, the figure is nearly double that recorded in April, possibly due to a slower rise in oil prices and the reduced imports. The central bank added that while this was the third largest surplus on record for the month of May, exports fell for the first time in 4 months as autos and steel struggled under U.S. tariffs.
The goods account surplus widened from the previous month as imports decreased more sharply due to falling oil prices than exports, which saw declines mainly in non-IT products.
Specifically, the goods account recorded a $10.66 billion surplus, although exports decreased by 2.9% to $56.93 billion, as imports decreased by a larger margin of 7.2% to $46.27 billion compared to last year. When both declined, it could be a sign of recession, but the BOK explained that this was not a domestic issue. Regarding the falling exports, when U.S. tariffs come into effect, the results will be clearer, especially with certain export items that South Korea relies on.
In the case of automobiles, the impact is expected to become more pronounced in the second half of the year. As local production expands, exports from Korea to the U.S. could decline to some extent.
Meanwhile, from January to May this year, the cumulative current account surplus stood at $35.11 billion, up $8.05 billion from the same period last year. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also, on the trade front, South Korea's top trade delegate is heading back to the U.S. for talks ahead of next week's deadline on the pause in country-specific tariffs. Our Moon Ji-young covers the upcoming trip.
With just days left before the temporary halt on tariffs expires, South Korea's chief trade negotiator Yo Han-gu is making his second visit to the United States within a week for high-level trade negotiations. He is set to meet with U.S. officials, including U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer and Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick in Washington this weekend. This marks a swift follow-up to his previous talks last week, during which he emphasized Seoul's commitment to good faith trade discussions with the Trump administration. Speaking at a plenary session of the National Assembly on Friday, Yeo indicated that he would actively consider requesting an extension from the U.S. side, depending on the progress of the negotiations. He further articulated South Korea's negotiating stance.
We will conduct negotiations pragmatically, prioritizing national interests, with the aim of reaching a mutually beneficial agreement between South Korea and the U.S. Our goal is to pursue a complete exemption from reciprocal tariffs and all product-specific tariffs, ensuring that we are at least not disadvantaged compared to competitor nations. Furthermore, in the industrial and energy sectors, we will establish a strategic cooperative relationship between our two countries.
This comes amid growing tariff pressure from the U.S.
So we're going to start sending letters out to various countries starting tomorrow. We'll probably have 10 or 12 go out tomorrow. And over the next few days, I think by the 9th, they'll be fully covered. And they'll range in value from maybe 60 or 70% tariffs to 10 and 20% tariffs.
Yeo stated that high-level and working-level negotiations would be conducted intensively to swiftly conclude the talks, thereby leaving open the possibility of additional negotiations. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
On the diplomatic front, an end to Russian aggression against Ukraine is looking unlikely in the near future as the latest talks between the leaders of the US and Russia on the phone failed to narrow their differences. Our Lee Seung-jae covers the talks that took place on Thursday.
U.S. President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin held phone talks on Thursday. According to the Kremlin, Putin, while referring to the war in Ukraine, stressed that Russia will achieve the aims it set, which is to eliminate the root causes that led to the current state of affairs. Putin's message to Trump was also reported by Russia's state television.
Of course, during this call, the situation in Ukraine was discussed, so Vladimir Putin informed Trump that Russia will not step back from its goal of removing the root causes that led to the confrontation in Ukraine.
Moscow has long demanded that Kyiv give up its NATO membership ambitions. Still, during the almost one-hour-long talks, Putin expressed his readiness to continue negotiations, adding that Moscow is looking for a political, negotiated solution to the conflict. Meanwhile, President Trump expressed a frustration over the lack of progress in the peace talks that the U.S. is trying to broker.
And we also talked about, as you know, the war with Ukraine. And I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy. No, I didn't make any progress with them today at all.
Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky expressed his hopes also on Thursday that he would have the opportunity to speak with Trump on Friday or in the coming days. He said that he wishes to discuss their bilateral relations as well as U.S. support amid the ongoing war with Russia. Zelensky also expressed hopes for continued support from the U.S. and Europe, stressing that strengthening cooperation and coordination through the U.S., the EU, and NATO is crucial. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The U.S. has added North Korea to its blacklist of cybersecurity. According to the White House website on Thursday, President Donald Trump issued an executive order to include North Korea, Russia and Iran to the current list. His order acknowledged that China posed the most active threat to the U.S., but added that Pyongyang, Moscow and Tehran were emerging as tangible concerns as well. Under the former Biden administration, only China was on the list. The South Korean military has taken into custody a North Korean who crossed the military demarcation line Thursday night. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, the individual crossed the line in the western part of the border and was tracked and apprehended. A thorough investigation into the details of the person's defection is expected to take place. Meanwhile, authorities also say there have been no signs of any unusual activity across the border. In other news, Korea's southeastern city of Daegu is hosting its annual International Musical Festival, and this year the event takes place amid fresh enthusiasm as it follows news of a South Korean original musical winning 6 Tony Awards, including Best Musical. Our Daejeon files this report.
This summer, Daegu once again transforms into a stage. Korea's largest musical festival, the Daegu International Musical Festival, or DIMF, brings creators and audiences together from all over. This year, showcasing 29 musicals from home and abroad. The dress rehearsal for this year's closing performance, Panda, is about to begin. This Chinese production blends dazzling acrobatics with traditional martial arts, a real treat for the eyes. A visual and musical spectacle, Panda tells a heartfelt story about love, coexistence, and the care we owe to nature. It's a piece that's beloved by Korean audiences. This reading performance, part of DIMF's musical incubation program, offers young talents a rare chance to present their work. Some pieces even go on to become full-scale productions with funding and support.
I received a lot of overall support from DIMF throughout the production process. But what helped me the most was getting direct feedback from the mentor instructors. That was incredibly helpful in developing and improving the piece.
I think the best part of this program is getting to meet great creators, working alongside talented actors, and simply having opportunities like this. For actors like me, that's one of the most valuable aspects.
With global success stories like Maybe Happy Ending, DIMF is more than just a festival.
As DIMF approaches its 20th anniversary next year, our hope is that musical fans from around the world will come to Daegu. To make that happen, we believe it's essential to connect the festival with tourism. Our goal and also our challenge is to grow DIMF into a truly global musical festival.
It's a symbol of what's possible for Korea's creative industry. Daejeon, Arirang News, Daegu.
Korea's patent office recently made a special acknowledgement of the inventions by individuals who sought innovation to support the country's independence. Our Cha Yun-kyung explains.
The Korean Intellectual Property Office held a memorial ceremony to honor Mr. Kwon Do-in, a patriotic independence activist based in the U.S. who was also an inventor. Kwon is remembered for his contributions to both Korea's independence movement and the advancement of invention. He was also the first Korean to apply for a patent in the U.S. with an apparatus that prevented damage to the body of a sewing machine. Mr. Kwon also applied for a patent for a curtain made from bamboo, which had become quite popular in the U.S. Mr. Chung In-ho, the first Korean to apply for a patent in Korea, invented a horsehair hat in 1909 to raise funds for the independence movement. Marking the 60th anniversary of Inventors' Day, the KIPO has come up with special achievement awards for independence activists who contributed to Korea's independence movement through invention during the Japanese colonial era. This year's award for Great Inventor went to a company that developed an electric semiconductor module for electric cars and robots. Cha Yun-kyung, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Liverpool's Portuguese forward Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva, also a professional footballer, died in a car crash just after midnight on Thursday local time on a highway near Spain's northwestern city of Zamora. Spanish authorities reported that the tire blew out from the Lamborghini they were driving in as it overtook another vehicle, causing the car to veer off the road and burst into flames. Emergency crews confirmed both men died at the scene. 28-year-old Jota had recently got married and had 3 young children. He was returning from vacation after helping Liverpool win the Premier League title. Jota made 182 total appearances and scored 65 goals for Liverpool. Tributes poured in from around the sports world, and hundreds of Liverpool fans gathered at Anfield, home of Liverpool, laying flowers in his memory. An investigation has been launched into the crash. The funeral is expected to be held on Saturday in the Portuguese city of Porto. Near Indonesia's tourist island of Bali, a ferry carrying 65 people sank late Wednesday night local time, leaving at least 6 dead and dozens missing. The KMP Tunu Pratama Jaya ferry, carrying 53 passengers and 12 crew members, as well as 12 vehicles, sank around 11:20 p.m., almost 30 minutes into the 5-kilometer Bali Strait crossing, after reportedly suffering engine failure and an engine room leak. Rescue efforts continued through Thursday in the rough seas, with 31 people saved but dozens still unaccounted for. On Thursday evening, rescue operations were temporarily halted due to strong currents, high waves, and limited visibility. President Prabowo Subianto has ordered a full emergency response while investigators examine the cause of the accident and whether unlisted passengers were on board. Indonesia experiences frequent maritime disasters due to its reliance on ferries and lax safety regulations. In Greece, a wildfire is spreading fast on the island of Crete, forcing over 5,000 residents and tourists to evacuate on Thursday. Strong winds reaching 80 kilometers per hour and extreme heat, linked to Europe's early summer heat wave, have led to the rapid spread of the blaze that broke out a day earlier. 230 firefighters and 46 fire engines and helicopters have been deployed to contain the fire, which were sweeping through forests, farmland, and residential areas. The fire service warns the island remains at very high risk, and with above-average temperatures and little rain forecast, containment is expected to take days. British band Oasis' highly anticipated reunion tour, Oasis Live 25, kicks off on Friday, July 4th in Cardiff, marking the first time Liam and Noel Gallagher have performed on the same stage in 16 years. Tickets for the UK and Ireland leg, featuring 17 stadium dates, sold out within 10 hours. A wide range of merchandise, including keyrings, hoodies, and shirts, is on sale ahead of the gig. The tour will travel globally after the UK run, heading to North America, Asia, Australia, and South America, with projected revenue exceeding $200 million. Oasis Live 25 will land in South Korea in October. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
The central and northern regions have been seeing monsoon rain today. About 5 millimeters per hour rain is expected around these areas. There will be 5 to 40 millimeters of rain in northern parts of Gyeonggi-do province and northern parts of Gangwon-do province. This rain will mostly stop tonight, but some areas will be rainy until tomorrow morning. With heatwave warnings and advisories issued in most parts of the country, daytime temperatures rose up to 31 degrees Celsius in Seoul, 36 degrees in Daegu, 37 degrees in Miryang. Tropical nights and heat waves are expected to get worse day by day. Tomorrow morning will be around 25 degrees across the country. Highs will move up to 33 degrees in Daejeon and Busan, 37 degrees in Gyeongju. It will rain occasionally in some central and northern parts of the country between Sunday and next Monday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Thank you for watching. Coming up next is our daily panel session.
Arirang TV is conducting an overseas TV viewer survey to provide you with a better global broadcast service. Share your valuable feedback on the Arirang TV website www.arirang.com or mobile application. Survey participants will be selected at random to receive special gifts. 2025 Arirang Overseas TV Viewers Survey. We look forward to hearing from you.
Your gateway to Korea, simply K-pop.
Hello everyone, I'm your Simply MC Taewi of AB6. 반갑습니다.
Gotta get it, come get it, boy. Come get it, get it, get it, get it, get it, boy. Come get it, get it, get it, get it, get it, boy.
처음부터 다 예상한 너의 kiss. 비틀비틀 부르는 그 이름. 내 계속 사겨봐, 감싸가 tricky. 네가 말한 그대로 황홀하는 네 머릿속은 맵지.
Oh, please don't cry. You don't like me, that's fine. You don't like me, keep on. You don't like me, then bye. You know like you love me, mind at a time.
귀엽던 그대로 돌아가서 말할 거야. 잘 다녀왔다고. Just stay. 언제나 내 맘속에.
Then this week's Simply K-pop.
Gateway to Korea.
Don't miss out.
On Press Perspective today, we shed light on the latest screen productions on Netflix by Korea and of Korea that have been making headlines. Do stay with us. Hello, welcome to Press Perspective for this Friday, July 4th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Right, it's that time of the week yet again, during which we touch upon a series of stories related to South Korea that made international headlines in recent days. And today we shed light on screen productions and more. For this, I have Thomas Moraska with American news agency UPI here in the studio. Thomas, as always, welcome.
Hi, thanks. Great to be here.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with the pundit's take on today's topic. Colin, welcome back.
Glad to be with you.
Right, Thomas, we shall start with you. Let's begin with news about Squid Game Season 3 dominating global Netflix charts. Thomas.
That's right. Netflix released their weekly top 10 charts on Wednesday, and Squid Game Season 3 dominated, was #1 across all 93 countries that they record top 10 lists. And this was only over 3 days. It launched on a Friday, so it was like Friday, Saturday, Sunday. 60.1 million viewers around the world over those few days. First time ever, I think, for a debut week that a series was #1 around the world. And it actually even boosted, brought Season 1 and Season 2 back to the top 10 list. Like Season 2 was, I think, #3, and Season 1 was #6 overall on this top 10 list. So, you know, the Squid Game global appeal continues. The first season is the most popular series of all time on Netflix, and I think the second one is close behind. So, it's an interesting phenomenon. I mean, in an era when I think, we've seen content is so kind of fractured and balkanized, and there's so many places to watch things and so many different streamers. This is maybe one of the biggest kind of global single franchises that exists. And, in related to Korean content, I mean, if you had said this 10 years ago, probably even 5 years ago, that the biggest global hit by Netflix is a Korean language series, that's an original, not a franchise from an existing IP or something, it would have been quite a surprise, I think. So, it's obviously a testament to what Korean content makers have accomplished here. I mean, it's not a little bit of, I wouldn't be the first person to point out the irony and sort of the commercial success of a series that is so biting in its satire and about, the competition and the inequality of the capitalist society that we live in. And, Netflix itself has really capitalized on the commercial appeal. I mean, here in Seoul, there was a giant parade this weekend. There's a big fan event, and there's been tie-ins with, GS25, the convenience store, has a Squid Game pop-up, and I think Shinsegae department store also has a Squid Game merchandise. So there's a little bit of irony there, and I think maybe in a bigger question, which we'll probably get into a little more, is, there's also, is such a dominant series and Netflix as such a dominant entity, also kind of reflecting the shifting inequality in the market. But in any case, still, it's you have to tip your hat to the success of Squid Game.
Right, for sure. Colin, another screen production on Netflix that's been making headlines is K-pop Demon Hunters, that reportedly showcases various elements, that is, of the Korean culture, including its folklore. What impact does this inclusion have on the international audience, do you think?
Yes, K-pop Demon Hunters, which the title reminds me of this movie, a Hollywood movie that made a big stir about 20 years ago called Snakes on a Plane. Because of its straightforward title, everybody was talking about it. You want to see snakes on a plane? Watch Snakes on a Plane. You want to see K-pop Demon Hunters? Watch K-pop Demon Hunters. And I've watched it. I watched it last week. I'm a bit out of its demographic. This is a film obviously made for younger viewers. I'm about to become a father. If my daughter was sort of 12 and watching K-pop Demon Hunters, I'd be pretty happy that you could do a lot worse for animation for that age bracket, or for entertainment of any kind, for that matter. But yes, as you say, it draws on Korean history. It draws on Korean mythology and traditional religion. It's not all just about the present of K-pop. The Demon Hunters are a girl band, a trio, and they're fighting a boy band of demons, but one of the girls is part demon herself, and one of the demon boys, the Saja boys, the band is called, is a demon, but he's good-hearted, so they've got to come together to defeat this threat to humanity. And one of the most interesting parts of the movie to me was this montage at the beginning showing that the guardians of humanity have always been female singers or performers. Now it's a girl band. Before, in the 50s and 60s, it's like singing like sister trios like Korea had at that time. Before that, mudang doing their shamanistic rites, so it's this whole lineage. And this sounds like thoroughly Korean, but this is actually an American production, which surprised me. It's Sony Animation Studios. One of the directors, there were two, is Korean American. She wanted to honor her heritage, and so it's very much the sensibility you would expect from that sentiment. She wants to bring in the traditional Korea she knows, and as well, it has a sort of a very Western sense of humor. So it's cross-cultural in many ways. And I think, when you look at there are these two animal characters, a gachi, a magpie, and a tiger. And they're prominent, and they've become the most beloved parts of the movie, almost more so than the actual human or demon characters. If you go on social media, the tiger especially is celebrated. Derpy, I think they called him in the production. He has no name in the movie itself, but these are icons from minhwa, or folk art in Korea, a long tradition. It was the sort of non-aristocratic version of Korean art, but more robust for that. And these two icons, the gachi, the magpie, and the tiger, they sort of represent Korean culture in many ways. And they take this sort of lovable form in the film, and they've become, as I say, two breakout elements. But there's a lot there, a lot of paths one can trace if one has an interest in or curiosity about Korean traditional culture, but also it's the kind of movie that'll be most appreciated, I think, by people who, they like K-drama, they like K-pop, and they've maybe been to Korea a couple times. There's a lot of Easter eggs there. Oh, I know that Namsan Tower, I know that, oh, Ramyeon, I know, that's so Korean, oh my God. That's really the audience for this movie. And I think some of these viewers will follow these threads to learn more about traditional Korea, and I think they'll enjoy that. Some, of course, they're there for the songs, naturally.
And against this backdrop, Thomas, do you suppose it is now safe to perhaps say that K-entertainment has found itself a strong fan base within the global arena?
Yes, I think that question has probably been safe to say for quite a long time, actually. I think, the question, I was actually talking about this the other day, is almost like when we look back at this time period, how will we think of this as an era kind of culture, or will we call it something, this Korean culture era? Because clearly it's become so well established in, the forms that now, K-pop and K-dramas, but obviously we're seeing, maybe Happy Ending, a musical winning 6 Tony Awards, last month on Broadway. Han Kang winning the Nobel Prize in Literature. We're seeing a real cultural flourishing across, multiple areas. So I think, the question is more about how did this happen? How do we understand this, and maybe, where does it go from here? I think I remember when Gangnam Style came out, and it was Psy, and I think that moment was like, oh, it almost felt this is kind of a novelty or a one-off, maybe. It wasn't quite representative of what K-pop in general was, and maybe this will just be a passing fad. But then we saw, the emergence of BTS and multiple other groups, and the same thing with Squid Game is a huge hit, but there have been several K-drama hits before then, and across genres. It's not just one style. I mean, there's romance and comedy and, horror and historical dramas. And so clearly, something is going on where there's this ability to keep turning out content that the globe enjoys. And, and I'm curious to really kind of explore or think about, how is that happening? Why is that happening? I mean, some of the conditions are just, I think, material conditions about investment and film schools and things. And I think there's also a sense of, every artistic movement or scene comes with a sense of community, and there's so many people that are creating work now that I think that feeds off of, one another and creates competition. So there's some elements of that. And I think, as well, I guess the question is, do you become a victim of your own success in some ways? Will things become over-commercialized? Will smaller, independent voices kind of get muscled out of the conversation? So I think those are some of the bigger questions. But as far as whether Korean culture has a global fan base, I think that is, unequivocally been answered for sure.
Right. Thomas, I wonder, do you suppose that Korean interest in Korean pop culture is perhaps also expanding to include its traditional culture? The reason I ask is because findings as of the first half of this year reportedly show 2.7 million people visited the National Museum of Korea. That's the highest in 20 years, apparently.
Yes, that's right. I was reading about this, and that, it was an increase of 64% over last year. And actually, the media articles that covered it here, speaking to some of the museum officials, they directly connected it to this interest in, Korean traditional culture being integrated into popular culture, and specifically mentioned K-pop Demon Hunter as one of the big driving factors. And they had actually talked about, there's also another element of commercialization and merchandising, where they said the sales of merchandise has also gone up quite a bit, and they've been quick to pick up on, as Colin was mentioning, the character of the tiger and the magpie. They've said sales of those items, there's like a badge or something that they sell there, has skyrocketed, and also the gat, like the Korean traditional men's hat, there's like a ballpoint pen with a hat on it, and that has also gone up quite a bit. So they're directly actually mentioned the K-pop Demon Hunter, and they also were talking about a dance competition, that show called World of Street Woman Fighter that's going on. That's a modern dance show, but I guess they did a challenge recently that incorporated traditional elements, and it went very viral online, and they said that's another thing. So yeah, I mean, that's definitely another facet that is growing in this overall popular culture
Right.
world.
And speaking about this growing interest in K-content overseas, Colin, amid the growing interest that is, there have reportedly been some false claims over Korean culture. Do you suppose the growing presence of K-content on the international arena could perhaps serve to promote better understanding about the Korean culture and history?
It certainly can stoke an interest in it. And when I meet people who are here, foreigners who are here for the first time in Korea, I often talk to them about this. I tell them to keep in mind this question of, to what extent is South Korea this 5,000-year-old society, and to what extent is it a less than 80-year-old society connecting itself to its distant past? Both are true in different proportions, in different ways. We talk about K-pop Demon Hunters. This is a good example of the present, the sort of cutting-edge K-pop culture being connected to the distant past, the mythological past in some senses. So you have these two ends of the historical spectrum. Where it gets tricky is in the middle. How exactly does that narrative work? How does the present actually connect to that past in a continuous way? I talk to teachers here who say, their students, they know individual episodes of Korean history. They have a very hard time describing the narrative of Korean history, no matter in how broad strokes it may be. So I think when it comes to understanding Korean culture, being able to evaluate these claims for yourself, Korean or any other culture, you do need an understanding of history, and you need to really know how one chapter really does follow another, rather than just knowing the mythology, the old sort of glorious episodes of the past, and knowing the present. You really have to understand what comes in the middle, which here in Korea can be very contested and can be seen as a battleground because it affects the legitimacy of the regime now, or the regimes that have existed. So you really need to think of, what's every step that's taken Korea from the past to its present. Really think clearly about that and get as clear an understanding as you can. And then, you'll be better equipped to evaluate when there are claims made about Korean culture, to just understand why those claims are being made and in whose interest they might be. But it's not easy. And it takes some serious scholarship in some cases.
Right, it really isn't easy. Thomas, moving forward, Parasite, it's been picked as the #1 movie for the 21st century by the New York Times. That being said, what do you suppose would serve to keep the K-content, if you will, above the test of time? What trait will keep it above?
Well, as far as Parasite goes, I was chatting with Colin about this before the show. We were both, I wouldn't say shocked, but I was surprised to see that it was the #1 film, not because I didn't think it was a great film, but obviously there's a lot of challenge, other excellent work. But I think, Parasite did seem to capture something in the zeitgeist that really resonated. And in a similar way, I would say Squid Game also captured something that just spoke to people. Different, obviously they're both different approaches, but they did speak to this sense of people just feeling the challenges and being put upon by the struggling to survive in an increasingly predatory and competitive and unequal society. I mean, they both spoke to that in a way that clearly the world related to. And I mean, as far as that aspect of it, I think, I was thinking about how, maybe South Korea is uniquely positioned in a way to comment about that. Just if you look at its own recent history of coming from, just how rapidly it developed economically, coming from, in living memory, it was a poor country for a lot of people to becoming this incredibly, successful and economically wealthy country, and, but yet creating inequality along the way. I mean, even just the move from, a dictatorship to democracy, there's been these wild swings of just social upheaval in the 90s and economic sort of crisis, so I think there's something in the atmosphere of Korean culture that maybe gives people this perspective where you can almost see things from the high and low in such a clear way. But beyond that, they both also found success by taking these topics on, but doing it with humor, satire, kind of panache. And I mean, that's just something that also speaks to the success, I think, of other content where, and where that comes from, I don't know exactly how to describe it, but, I think both series, they blend so many genres, they have elements of horror, humor, satire, and I think a lot of successful K-content also does that well. K-pop is often considered this kind of blender of a lot of different styles, and a lot of series that have been successful have had that kind of, what was The Kingdom or something? It's like history and zombies, and I think there's always an element of that that's, somehow brought into bear. So I mean, there's some combination of just, again, like a system that enables people to create this type of content. People also are not being stopped from making it. When you look at countries, authoritarian countries that don't, allow freedom of expression, so you don't see things like this coming out of a China or a Russia. So that's part of it, that there's an openness. And, there has been an investment and a promotion of culture, so that's kept it going. And I think, the entire cultural marketplace itself has just, continued to foment. So, I mean, a lot of elements, but I just think in some ways Korea itself is a kind of a concentrated version of so many things that the contemporary world is going through that it has almost a special perspective on it.
Right, and staying with Korea's content market, if you will, Colin, this is something that Thomas alluded to very briefly at the start of our talk. Some say the presence of streaming services like Netflix are both a blessing and a burden. What are your thoughts?
Yes, it's true. Netflix, apart from, say, YouTube, has got to be the main channel through which foreigners are accessing or receiving Korean popular culture. As Thomas mentioned, Squid Game is very popular on Netflix, maybe the most popular production of any kind on there. I think it's #1 taken as a whole, although it's hard not to notice, even if you haven't watched the 2 succeeding seasons of Squid Game, that the critical evaluations have been falling steadily. And that may owe to the fact that Korean dramas originally were not produced in seasons at all. This is a structure we're used to in US television and Netflix. The Netflix model is like, you release a season of a show. If that does well, you do season 2, season 3. And oftentimes, yes, whatever countries the show comes from, they do decline season on season. But here in Korea, and there was a good discussion of this, an insightful discussion in the book Pop City by a researcher named Oh Yu-jong, I think her name is, how Korean dramas were once produced in real time, essentially, in response to audience demands. So if the audience liked some particular character, the show might actually change to be about that character. Episodes would be written in part the day of broadcast, sometimes it's still being shot. So that had downsides too. But now with the Netflix model, you've got to make make the season, see how it lands. Maybe you make another one, maybe you don't. But in the case of Squid Game Season 2, there's also been Netflix scale, Netflix budgets. In that series, I think each episode cost something like $9.8 million to make, which was not the case with the Korean dramas of old. So you do get a sense the weight of the scale of production might be getting to be a bit much. That has to be justified by finding a large audience outside Korea, of course. And so the engineering you get, that whether it be narrative or in other aspects of the production, is we've got to appeal to foreigners. And it moves ever so steadily away from what made Korean dramas interesting, which was that they were geared toward Korean audiences. So Squid Game is still successful. People are watching the third season. By any standard, it's succeeding, but I wonder if you do look at this, you can see, if you look closely, the golden goose being killed in a way, or a threat in any case to the life of the golden goose. You know, Korean content, I hate that word, but Korean content is successful for a reason. And if you make it less Korean in search of a wider audience to justify the budgets, to justify the scale, there is a certain risk there.
Right. Thomas, speaking as a foreign correspondent based here in South Korea, would you say there's been a rise in the number of requests for stories related to Korean content, the word that Colin does not like too much, Korean culture or K entertainment, if you will?
Sure. I mean, just out of the sense that, you know, no one wants to miss out on something. I mean, I think there's always a sense of editors wondering what's happening, you know, and there's just so much more going on. I mean, it's not like the days of, you know, it was a novelty or you know, it was unusual to just report about, oh, this, you know, this one show or this one band. I mean, it's so saturated in global culture that, yeah, so the angle, I think the angles are different now too. I mean, they're more specific, and I think the amount of coverage here, just in general, there's so many more pieces, you know, they're more journalists based here, or newsrooms here, and you know, so they'll just be every day. I feel like I'm seeing something that's just about a little niche trend in South Korea that, you know, wouldn't have been picked up just because there wouldn't have been the people on the ground here. So I mean, I think it's just overall, yeah, absolutely. It's you know, it's more and it's multifaceted and it's more specific, you know.
Right, for sure. Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. We'll have to end here. Thomas, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Colin, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, and for those of our viewers who have yet to watch K-pop Demon Hunters and Squid Game Season 3, please do so this weekend. That's all for this week. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend and see you next time.
도시는 세계와 연결되어 문화를 창조했고 새로운